Milestones of the Century. Italy's 1956 Olympics sees athletes from 32 nations open the spectacle of peace. Italian President Gronchi watches the arrival of the famed Olympic torch. During the 11 days of competition, the flame burns constantly in this bowl. Completing the ceremonies are 1,000 athletes and the Olympic oath of good sportsmanship sounding up the snow-swept peaks. Here, America's hopes ride in the two-man bobsled race, with Bud Washbond, son of a former Olympic champion, steering the U.S. sled down the twisting mile-long run. But the best the American sled can finish is fifth. The Italians, who know every bump and rut, zoom down the chute at a mile-a-minute clip. And the daredevil pilot and his jubilant brakeman give Italy the gold medal. In the men's figure skating, a 22-year-old Colorado collegian, Hayes Allen Jenkins, brings America its first gold medal. This is Jenkins' crowning achievement, climaxing 14 years and 18,000 hours of practice, leading U.S. skaters to a 1-2-3 finish. Hayes Allen Jenkins. Kenley Albright, a 20-year-old pre-medical student from Newton Center, Massachusetts, chokes back the pain of an ankle injury to capture the women's crown, helping America to the first sweep of both men's and women's skating titles since 1920. Courageous Kenley Albright is queen of the Ice Queens. 89 international ski stars are entered in the downhill racing. Austria's Toni Seiler, a two-time gold medal winner, is seeking a record-smashing third championship as he plummets downward over an ice-crusted series of bone-rattling bumps. Seiler is only one of 17 skiers to complete the daring descent without a spill. The others go head over heels. Writing a standout chapter into the history of alpine skiing, Seiler streaks to his third gold medal. Austria's daring young man on skis, Toni Seiler. Fame's last chance, the final day. The skier strains for distance, fights for form. Finland's Aulis Kalakorpi finishes second to help continue the Scandinavian monopoly of this dangerous and demanding event. Seeming to lean on the wind, he stretches far forward in perfect position for a smooth and effortless landing. Another Finn, Antti Häiväinen, hurtles himself more than 275 feet to capture the coveted championship. The 1956 Winter Olympics, another sports milestone of the century. Milestones of the Century. On August 6, 1926, a 19-year-old mermaid from America challenged the dangerous waters of the English Channel. Gertrude Ederle waited with youthful confidence as grease was applied that would protect her and provide warmth against the icy waters. With the handshakes of well-wishers and a few last words of advice from her coach, Gertrude Ederle began the tortuous race through freezing waters and heavy undertow. Hour after hour, Gertrude Ederle fought against winds and currents that ripped across the channel. From the open boat that guided her to France came constant words of encouragement. Newsmen recorded for the waiting world a young girl's heroic story of daring and courage and a fight that was slowly being won in the cold waters of the English Channel. Without touching the boat, which would have meant disqualification, Gertrude Ederle ate rationed food in the rough waters. giant ocean tugs towered above the small figure in the water. In the tradition of the Roaring Twenties, a band accompanied the Armada and played music to cheer her on. Halfway across the channel, mounting waves threatened to bash her against the boat. Fighting against wind and tide, Gertrude Ederle was facing her roughest test of endurance. As she touched shore, Gertrude Ederle had become the first woman ever to swim the English Channel. New York rolled out its red carpet for the biggest ticker tape parade of the time. Thousands cheered welcome to the nation's reigning queen. Grover Whalen, New York's dapper handshaker and official greeter, rode with Miss Ederle as the huge crowd surged for a glimpse of America's leading lady. At City Hall, a cheering tribute echoed through the streets of New York in this tumultuous greeting. Host of the celebration was dapper Jimmy Walker, as Gertrude Ederle achieved a milestone of the century in woman's great moment of glory. Milestones of the century. This is the campus of North Texas State Teachers College at Denton, Texas. In 1951, a 22-year-old student named Billy Maxwell was ending his sophomore year. Billy was captain of the college golf team, and no one had ever heard of him. After class, Billy went home to prepare for the biggest event he'd ever entered, the National Amateur Golf Championships at Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. His wife had been supervising his training diet, but like many another youngster in the opening rounds of big-time golf, Billy believed he'd be eliminated soon, and so took clothes for only a few days. But Billy Maxwell, wearing clean clothes, rushed from his home, reached the finals. Top players in the field, among them Sam Urzetta, Frank Stranahan, and Dick Chapman, had fallen in earlier rounds. Here, facing Maxwell is Joe Gagliardi, then a 39-year-old attorney from New York who had never even won the local championship on his home grounds at Mamaroneck. On the first 9 holes, Maxwell trails Gagliardi by 1 stroke, but he evens it up in the 10th. On the 14th, Billy Maxwell makes a dream shot. Out of the trap, and wow, that shot is the turning point. Maxwell has done the impossible. Now it's up to Gagliardi, who must sink a 10-footer to keep even. And he misses by a hair. Maxwell goes 1 up. In the afternoon session, Gagliardi still trails. He's been playing with a handicap of 3 painfully abscessed teeth and misses some important shots. Maxwell is now 2 up, and he stays ahead, despite heartbreakers like this. But on the 14th, he got his eye back, and he sinks this putt with deadly accuracy. On the fatal last hole, Gagliardi, fighting hard to keep alive, has to come out of the rough. If Maxwell can sink this, the crown is his. And sink it, he does. A gallery of 5,000 hails the youngest national amateur golf champion since Bobby Jones took the same title at the same age 20 years before. Holding the cup he never dreamed he'd win, Billy tells the crowd, "I must be dreaming." Back at home, Billy proudly shows off his silver trophy as the fall term of college opens. Welcomed like a Homer returned from some deadly journey, the limelight did not turn Billy's head. Despite his new honors, he completed his studies. On the lawn of the North Texas Golf Club, Billy showed the imperfect but persistent form that placed his name enduringly among the sports milestones of the century. Milestones of the century. When the 20th century was very young, woman's place was in the home. Few sports and few jobs were considered ladylike enough for her attention. The amply padded and well-corseted young woman who strolled in New York's Easter Parade of 1903 was supposed to be a companion, not a competitor to man. The fashions of the infant century were daring compared to those of the century before. These aren't lady gangsters with submachine guns, but lady hunters in startling Paris hunting costumes, which probably scared away all the game. For motoring, designers created the trouser skirt. Watch closely for a glimpse of well-turned ankle. The glamour gal of 1917 captured male hearts with dazzling creations like this. And furs were really furs. This little wraparound is of ermine with trimmings of mink. Here's a cape of Russian sable. This is chinchilla. It cost $6,500 in those days. That's why Mrs. Ederle does not have one in these days. The world had never, like the stock market, like many another fad of the temporary 20s, exposed knees became just a memory. Princess Eugenie hats were pulled down over one eye. Big veils had a brief bow. Some girls cut their hair short, and some piled it up high. By mid-century, women's fashions had approached a style that was pleasing to both male and female. In their climb toward the ultimate in high fashion, designers provide us with a never-ending cavalcade of beauty in our century. Milestones of the century. During the First World War, women had replaced men even in such hazardous occupations as painting smokestacks. And after the armistice, they kept right on the job. There's nothing so surprising about this scene. What did you expect? A cha-cha? In the days of the newly emancipated woman, they would try anything. This contemporary of Pearl White dangles over eternity without even ruffling her Marcel. Proof that the teenagers of the last generation had their wild moments is this 19-year-old miss. She thought nothing of hanging by her feet. Then, as the wind whipped about her, by a single foot. Up there with the earth thousands of feet below and no parachute, she wasn't afraid to do anything. She's hurtling into space. Look, Mom, no hands. There certainly was a new breed of woman around in the 20s. Her motto seemed to be, anything a man can do, I can do better. This little lady was proof positive. This one used shackled ankles and a hook for her hair-raising transfers from plane to plane. Most amazing of all, perhaps, was this little 10-year-old flapper who got right into the spirit of the times by doing the Charleston 2,000 feet up. A few years earlier, no woman would think of changing a tire. This gal does it the hard way. Imagine transferring planes while hanging onto a heavy wheel. This was one girl who was never considered a flat tire. Despite the grease stains, our little gal still manages to look frail, feminine, and even coy. No grease stains for this Jane. She powders up before going up. Here she is atop a looping airplane with only a few thin wires for support. When the spinning Earth appears above, she is dangling in space, head down. Yes, when women became emancipated in the 20s, they really flew high. But their daring, reckless spirit was merely a reflection of the era. For this was the time of the silver flask on the hip and the tin Lizzie in the garage, of rose stockings, marathon dancing, mahjong, miniature golf, and prohibition. The antics of these new women contributed a topsy-turvy milestone to a century then new itself. Later, they discovered men wanted a woman who was down to earth, a gal who could stand on her own 2 feet. Milestones of the century. What is America's #1 summer sport? You're looking at it. For the kids, this is nature's playground. From the era of the shy bloomer girls to the now famed bikini, millions have thronged to the beaches to test their skills. Against the rolling waves, it was here and in water holes and swimming pools across the country that America's swimming and diving champions were born. In one of the most thrilling spectacles in Olympic diving history, 2 American mermaids fought for the coveted gold medal. Ivy Ann Olson, United States diving champion and winner of the springboard title 3 years in a row, was defeated by her teammate Vicki Graves by 51/100 percentage point. 2 glamorous American mermaids smilingly embrace in victory. Perhaps in no other sporting event is grace, timing, and coordination so important. An aquatic mermaid makes a vision of floating beauty. For the champion, perfection is the only road to success. If you have a large family, you can put on this exhibition for your neighbors. For the acrobat, the trampoline highboard provides additional diving thrills. This is not a trick for a crowded swimming pool. Posing prettily, this young lady takes off into space. Proving that practice makes perfect, this aquatic daredevil does it again for the Pathé cameras. Among the champion of champions in aquatic speed racing was pretty Ann Curtis of San Francisco. Her flying hands and threshing feet were the only view many of her opponents ever saw, as she shattered 3 world records. Another American champion was the lovely and spectacular Eleanor Holmes. Her famous backstroke won 12 national AAU championships and an Olympic gold medal before she retired as the beautiful queen of the aquacade. This smiling young kid is Johnny Weissmuller, who was later to become Hollywood's Tarzan. By the mid-20s, he had broken every freestyle record on the books, and his own record of 100 yards in 51 seconds stood for 16 years. America's champions performed triumphantly through the pages of Olympic history to add their triumphs to the sports milestones of the century. Milestones of the Century. On the deck of this aircraft carrier, 700 American men lost their lives in a single day in a naval engagement which, as an example of bravery and courage, stands without peer in the annals of naval history. This is the flight deck of the USS Franklin, renowned in World War II as Big Ben. At 7 a.m. on March 19, 1945, Big Ben was steaming into battle. And at 7 a.m., a suicide Japanese dive bomber crashed amidships with 2 bombs aboard. Franklin's cargo of bombs and rockets was exposed, ready for loading aboard her own fighter bombers on the hangar deck. 200,000 pounds of explosives and 12,000 gallons of high-octane gas were in danger. Firefighters worked feverishly, but at 7:11 a.m., a series of explosions rocked the great ship anew. Fire swept the hangar deck, taking all lives, rendering 22 planes useless. Another Japanese plane attacked, but the gun crews were ready. He went down in flames. And now at 9:52 a.m., the most serious explosion of all threatened the life of the Franklin herself. But she lived. Steaming at 8 knots directly toward Japan, Captain Gary refused to abandon ship and ordered the rescue destroyers in. Close alongside, disregarding danger, the cruiser Santa Fe poured water into the fires on the Franklin, listing badly at 14 degrees. Her flight deck torn and charred from the mighty blasts below. The destroyer Hickok joins the rescue and presses hard against the Franklin under full power. She disregards danger as scores of the crew jump to safety. 800 others were rescued from the sea, and of the ship's complement of 3,000, 2,000 were brought to safety. And under her own power, the Franklin proudly steamed for port, upholding the finest traditions of the U.S. Navy. Back home, she was afforded a hero's welcome as she steamed up the river past the Statue of Liberty. And finally to dock, but not to be forgotten. Unlike other great ships of her class damaged in the war, she was not to be scrapped. She was fitted again for battle, not to become a memory, but to remain a battle-ready symbol of a milestone of courage in this century. Big Ben, the ship that wouldn't sink. Milestones of the... In 1916, the spotlight swung to the conventions. The Republicans met in Chicago. They were determined to depose Woodrow Wilson, who had been the first Democratic president, save Grover Cleveland, since before the Civil War. Senator Warren G. Harding was convention chairman. Representing the old guard was Chauncey M. Depew. The rains came, but that didn't keep away the inevitable suffragettes, picketing for a Votes for Women plank in the GOP platform. The Republicans nominated dignified, impressive Charles Evans Hughes, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Here's a typical campaign portrait with wife and daughters. He was destined to go to bed believing himself President of the United States and to wake up a defeated candidate. Theodore Roosevelt was nominated again by his progressive Bull Moose Party, but the old Rough Rider declined, swung his support to Hughes, and sent off a rip-snorting speech-making tour. Two heroines of the Mexican border raids presented him with flowers of Albuquerque. "Bully," cried Teddy, waving the bouquet with typically hearty Roosevelt enthusiasm. Later, he demonstrated how to shake hands and keep the line moving. So the Republican Party, once split by Roosevelt's vote 4 years previously, was healed once more, while Teddy, in the coat he wore at San Juan Hill, displayed the fire of old. Democrats met in St. Louis. Their cry was peace with honor, for Europe's war had become a national issue. Tammany leader Murphy posed with young and rising Alfred E. Smith. There was little doubt that President Wilson would again be the Democratic candidate. For William Jennings Bryant, a brilliant career was drawing to a close. With brother Charles, he campaigned for Wilson. Later, resigning as Wilson's Secretary of State, the silver-tongued orator, 3 times defeated for the presidency, settled down to do some fishing. For Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a brilliant career was just beginning. In this rare and striking film sequence captured by a Pathé cameraman during Wilson's administration, we discover that handsome FDR made a dashing Assistant Secretary of the Navy. At Shadowlawn, his summer White House in New Jersey, President Wilson learned that he had been renominated by 1,092 votes to 1. Here we see Senator Ollie James, an orator of the old school, as he makes the official notification. His party hailed Wilson as the man who had kept America out of the European war. On election night, the presidency had been conceded to Hughes, when California swung to the Democrats to re-elect Wilson by a scant 4,000 votes. Truly a milestone of the century.
To Washington in the autumn of 1941 came 2 visitors whose personal union symbolized the old adage that all the world loves a lover. And all the world loved the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. England's ex-king, who abdicated the throne for the love of a woman, arrived at the British consulate still in the service of his revered and war-plagued nation. The Duke of Windsor, with his American-born Duchess, made this tour in an effort to bring Britain's allies closer to her side. Speaking to Americans, the Duke had this to say.
These are hard and critical days for us all. And I would like to speak for my countrymen in expressing to America the heartfelt thanks of Britain for the moral and material support you are so lavishly giving her in this time of trial.
Flying to Canada, the Duke and Duchess stopped off at their ranch in the province of Alberta. Here in the remote areas of Canada, Windsor won the admiration of everyone. The rest was welcome, but necessarily short. Even as the Windsors walked through these placid surroundings, they were burdened with the knowledge that England was preparing for a last-ditch stand against Hitler. They were off again, this time to New York, meeting Mayor LaGuardia and enthusiastic crowds who were pulling for England as much as their colorful mayor. Between lectures, the Duke and Duchess visited the Empire State Building and scanned the great vital expanse of freedom's land below. They were welcomed by the giant building's landlord himself, the famed Al Smith. Men from 2 threatened democratic nations, which did not want war, stood between freedom and the Superman dream of world domination. Their unity had been obligatory since the publication of Hitler's belligerent Mein Kampf. At a press conference held at New York's Waldorf Astoria, the Windsors warded off questions involving their personal life and stressed matters which they held to be more important to Britain's war effort. Dedicated to their appointed task, the couple rushed to Washington, where they met and spoke with Mrs. Roosevelt. The Windsors were warmly received wherever they made personal appearances. The Windsors, knowing that England had a strong ally in America, carried their message to the White House. That moral alliance grew to produce a formidable war machine, standing both nations in good stead among the milestones of the century.